thumbs up from the back row. We are almost at the end of this long and rich year of Trias Readings. And we're beginning to look forward to our next year. But our last guests tonight are Gavin Grant and Kelly Lake. And they're here all week. So they will be here doing a public event on Friday at 10 o'clock in the Fisher Center. Is that right?
No, the Trias house.
No, it's in the Trias house, which is at 10 College Ave. But don't go there before then because it's also a private neighborhood populated by your professors. They don't want to see you there before. But at 10 a.m., they're going to run a zine making workshop. And the zine is this thing from the olden days before the internet, which is it's a kind of lo-fi stapled publication that is made on the Xerox machine that you steal from your employers in order to distribute locally alternative ideas and literature. So it'll be like kind of like going to one of those theme parks like Sturbridge Village, where you get to go back in time. And also in other ways awesome. I think they brought some slush because they run their own zine and they have a small press, and I think they're going to share the slush with you. And if you don't know what slush is, it's a really awesome mind-altering drug. Look it up on the internet. You're gonna. That cool guy with the sunglasses, he sells it. Okay. So thank you all for coming tonight. Make your cell phones quiet. This is looking like a really weird introduction now that I read it. But I'm just gonna have to launch. Here's my first sentence. Seriously, this is my first sentence. We live in a Puritan nation obsessed with pornography. That's what I wrote. We want more, and we have less. Everything is entertaining. We're incredibly bored. Anyone can be shot anytime and in any place. Our soldiers still fight in our nation's longest war. We're so safe. We need theme parks which remind us how to be afraid. The poor and the rich exist in alternate universes which occupy the same physical space. It's always dangerous to name your time, to call your place distinctive, to try to distinguish its qualities. But this American moment asks us to sustain not only paradoxes, but perhaps delusions. We are told one thing is so, we're in danger, but experience its opposite, our safety, to be true, more true, or true, despite the certainty of our threat. Tonight's guests, Gavin Grant and Kelly Link, have made a home for the kind of literature that doesn't ask us to choose between what we are told and what we know, between one world and the other. In their zine, Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet, their small press, and in their creative work, they produce a space where the oddball, the uncomfortable, the weird and obsessive, the nerdy and secret can find a home. If the culture as a whole is either or, Kelly and Gavin make art and encourage art, which is both and. Writers, you know that feeling you get when you've been working for an hour without cease and you wake into yourself, look up at the screen to see what you've done, and you think, something is seriously wrong with me. That's the work Kelly and Gavin encourage, the wrong and the true. I'm so thrilled to have them here with us this week. Please join me in welcoming them today.
proud to live in this country, even though I find it a pretty horrible place on a day-by-day level. The government does horrible things, people do horrible things to each other, but around the world, everybody does. So I might as well live here where I can get to publish weird fiction and sort of survive on it. With the help of my wife who actually sells books, unlike me. So I mostly publish stuff. I sometimes write stuff. And a couple of years ago, a friend of ours from Kentucky wrote this great science fiction story about future Kentucky and future Tennessee and just this weird kind of biodynamic war that they were having between them. And I thought, well, if he can write that about Kentucky, I can write something weird about Scotland. So I wrote a story about Scotland in the future called Widows in the World. And it was published online in a magazine called Strange Horizons, which is great, even though it established me. It was translated into Polish, which is awesome. And then it was reprinted in this book called Caledonia Dreamin' without the G, Strange Fiction of Scottish Descent. And it is full of Scottish words that are not part of the English language, like bogue. Oh man, that totally gives me the bogue. Blah! Cludgy, where your bogue belongs. Clatty or clarty, the way they spell it. Rams, Cutify, Murney, Mocket, Laird, Thrawn, Wersh. Wersh is a great word. It sort of means bitter, but it doesn't quite mean bitter the way you mean bitter. Apples are sometimes Wersh. So the words they chose for my story, I suggested a story, a word, curry, which means curry on and cuddle up. You're sitting on a couch with your best beloved and under a blanket on a cold night, and you curry on them with each other, and they were like, no. They chose canny, which is, they say is shrewd and cunning, cautious, steady, restrained, and gentle. Okay. So, this story is called Widows in the World. The granny wasn't talking to any of them. The husband was collecting rocks. The other wives had stayed with the house. Her mother was stretching at the other end of the beach, and the kids were running wild in the waves. The baby, still in utero, had only recently begun talking to her, and already knew when to keep quiet. The granny was fed up with these endless tiny Aberdonian islands. She wanted to go north, where the husband would go outside without complaining endlessly about the heat. She could see him picking through his rocks. This beach was only 50 or 60 years old, from after the seas rose, and she wondered what he could find of interest. But she wasn't talking to him either. He sent the granny a message: "I'm going to look for the original beach," and he walked off into the surf. She was worried about him, but the house would look after him. When had he last gone swimming? Could he even swim? Her mother was walking along the water's edge, and something was swimming along parallel to her. Was it the husband? It didn't move like him. It swam in closer, and her mother stopped, pulled something out of her pocket, and fed it. It was a selkie. It lay in the surf, not changing. It was bigger than her mother, but the granny could tell it was at her mother's beck and call. How unsurprising. Her mother drove the granny out of her mind. The granny stamped away from her family, keeping her head down, watching her feet. The hill mosses were fighting with the reeds. Something flashed in front of her feet, and she slowed her perception to see a tiny grass snake trying to get away. She picked it up behind its neck. She was fascinated. She hadn't seen one since she'd married into this house. Her mother was calling from the beach, and then the house was breaking in with a call too. Something was happening. The granny dropped the snake in her pocket, but she wasn't thinking about that anymore. She was running toward the water, and she couldn't think of anything. The granny put the gun down. She picked up her embroidery, told the house, "Let's move." She kick-started her rocking chair as she felt the baby kicking inside. The carpet was soaking up the mess her mother's body was making. The rest of the family waves muttered as the house trembled, withdrew its roots from England's northernmost tip, checked for clearance, and slowly took off. It was the granny's turn in embodiment, at being the children's mother. So, horrified and disconcerted as the rest of the wives were, they didn't complain. "Don't wake the husband," she told the house. The house said, You left instructions to wake him when the latest bother was over, one of the wives muttered. That's probably now. You know the husband hates change, said the granny. Besides, he wasn't talking about my be damned mother. He was talking about the Hague. Which reminded her, part of her was still at work. Her embroidery hardly needed more than a look now and then, so she put in a call for lenience at the trial of the latest Georgian dictator in the Republic Hague. That would do for work. The granny's mother whispered, Sarah, you misplaced that stitch. The granny hefted her gun, shot her mother again. The granny's heads-up display pinpointed her mother's body's moment of physical death and red-flagged the fractal pattern of her mother's consciousness upwards, jolting into action. The granny activated a confinement shell around the still-leaking body, and when her mother's dead woman's switch engaged, the explosion spattered the remains all over the inside of a molybdenum box. The granny sniffed. The wives fell silent. She told the house to move her mother's coffin into the basement. She would have gotten rid of her mother last month, when the old bag insisted on going ashore to help a stranded Selkie back into the sea. The granny had been distracted, first by the husband out rock collecting, then she caught a grass snake. She hadn't seen a live one in 20 years. She'd taken it in, nursed it back to health. There was something else, something at the edge of her mind, the granny thought, but she couldn't think what it was. 2 minutes ago, her mother had breezed in and thanked the granny for at least keeping a tiny bit of fresh meat in the house, even though snake was rarely anyone's first choice, or even the third, really. The wives were disturbed. Disembodied, they flowed through everything in the room, rattling the coffee table, spinning the old paper embroidery patterns, knocking the granny's walking stick against the back of her high-backed wooden rocker. She could hear them whispering to one another. Where did she get her gun? Will we all go to prison? I'm glad she did it. What are we going to do? You should sleep, one said to the granny. This is taken out of you. The mother has released spores when it's in your lungs, said another. She gave you a flu. The granny ignored them. She was annoyed. She hadn't clothed the snake, but on the other hand, she didn't want to open the molybdenum coffin to pick through her mother's remains to find some snake DNA. She could bet her mother's nanos were working away at reassembling her body. If the granny opened the shell, one of her mother's uploads might access her mother's body and she'd be back and even more annoying than ever. I should be okay. I haven't been outside, the granny said. But you can never tell. Replace my blood and the organs, she told the house, and maybe it's time to take out the baby. The baby spoke to the granny. Not until we're both ready. Thank you. The house used her chair to attach tubes to the granny's arms and legs. Some nasty things began to happen below her waist, but she applied a professional level of destruction and ignored them. The itch in her belly could be scratched after the house had put her fully back together again. She was embroidering a cape for her baby. At the Hague, the next case the Great Ear Caucus had recently found the dictator of the righteous and godly democracy of the Southern American states guilty by popular consensus and was auctioning tickets for the lynch mob to carry out his sentence. The granny filed her objection and applied her day's funds to finance court security for herself for the next 2 hours. She turned the cape in her hands. It was conch shell pink. Girls ran in the family, but they did everywhere now. The house had leveled off at 5,000 meters and asked for a destination. The granny thought there was one person with the gumption to help out with a problem the size and shape of her mother's dead body. Malik. House, she said, let's go to the Isle of Bute. The island of Bute used to lie off the west coast of Scotland. During the Great Stupidity, an ancient and corrupt glider bomb, looking for a long defunct US Navy base miles away in Dunoon, had taken out the largest town on the island, Rothsay. But the rest of the island had been quietly diked up before the Greenland melt flood, so that although it was now below sea level, most of it survived. The granny directed the house to the northeast end of the island near an old submerged ferry ramp, where it landed softly on a wet bracken, sending its stabilizers deep into the earth. The house told the granny her mother's nanos had reassembled her corpse, and it was monitoring the corpse for personality re-uploads. The granny certainly wasn't going to bring her mother back. If her mother found a way back, the granny would deal with her. She would argue she hadn't technically killed her mother, she just removed her mother from her body and removed the opportunity for her mother to regain access to her body. Crossing the water to western Scotland was a problem, but staying back in the federated Northern English Islands Where the current authorities might not agree with the granny's liberal interpretation of her own behaviour, could only have been worse. Don't wake the husband yet, she told the house. But let's do something he likes. Maybe California bungalow, but glass in the porch. It was August, hot and steamy in England. In Scotland. Outside, the rain beat down, and the house air filters couldn't completely remove the smell of sheep shit. Despite the heat, it was still below the husband's recommended temperature range. Anyway, she thought, we won't be here long. The wives susurrated, chorused quotes from Verdi's Macbeth. Don't get your hopes up, the granny said. I'll take no tips from dead Italians or Lizzo's beef. The house said, the Free Island of Bute is requesting poll tax registration. We have 43 minutes until the free hour expires. The granny swore. Send out hunters and farmers. I don't care what you find, we need inventory. And pay the tax at 59 minutes. Pay the tax at 59 minutes. The hunters and farmers, somewhat malleable robots with a small degree of autonomy, scattered out from the cellar door. Farmers moving slowly, hunters quickly disappearing from sight. Blood replaced. The granny put her embroidery down. She levered herself out of her rocker. She kicked her mother's coffin. She said, I'm going to visit the children. The children's playroom, all soft green walls and bouncy rock-painted floor, was empty. It was the granny's fault, of course, and her mother's, for distracting her. The poor children couldn't be blamed. Their mother had died long ago, and none of the other wives could be said to be particularly motherly, especially the heavily pregnant granny. Granny, only to her own children, lost long ago before she ever came to this house. The granny scolded the house anyway. The house showed her how the kids had escaped. Ariadne, the eldest, had tied up Percy, the youngest, the only boy, and melted his eye with a button laser. Percy's nanny nanos couldn't rebuild his eye fast enough, so the house had brought in the mechanic nurse. Ariadne had claimed to be in shock. It took less than a minute from the end time of Percy's restraints to the three children scrambling out of the house, scrambling the house tracking system and their subsequent disappearance. The house showed her its latest satellite pic of the three children. Percy was riding the nurse. The three of them had stopped to change into camo suits. They'd be nearly untrackable soon. The granny asked the house for an outdoor suit. She stopped in the hall on her way to touch up her hair, clean off the wife's target acquisition software, kick the cat. Tell me if Malik contacts you or if the husband wakes himself, she told the house. The house indicated that it had an emergency message for the granny, but she ignored it. She was going out. Whatever it was could wait. The flus had killed off more men than women, and for certain the remaining men had become a little full of themselves. She did love living with one in a family, the singularity of body, the pure reek of him. The pure reek of him. She didn't count Percy yet. It'd be decades before he could even vaguely be considered an adult. The house flapped the letterbox at her. She aimed to kick it at two, just on purpose. She loved the house more than she should. Otherwise, I don't want to hear from you, unless the little shits come back before me. And I'll stop there.
Hi. I'm going to read from a newish story called The New Boyfriend, which is going to be published in an anthology called Monstrous Affections, which is an anthology that we edited for Candlewick. It's a young adult anthology. And then I will have a new collection out from Random House in January. This will be in that as well. And can you guys hear me? Is this a good volume? Okay. Ainsley doesn't rip open presents. She's always been careful with her things, even the things that don't matter. Emmy's a ripper, but this is not Emmy's present, not Emmy's birthday. Sometimes Emmy thinks that this may not be Emmy's life. Better luck next time around, Emmy, she tells herself. Ainsley scores under the tape with a fingernail, then carefully wiggles the pink wrapping paper out from under the coffin-shaped box. Ainsley's new boyfriend is in there. Ainsley's birthday this year is just Ainsley and her bestest, oldest friends, just Ainsley, Sky, Ellen, and Emmy. No family allowed, no boys. Earlier there was sushi and cake and lots of pictures to put up online so that everyone will know how much fun they are having. No presents, Ainsley said, but of course Emmy and Ellen and Sky bring presents. No one ever means it when they say that. not even Ainsley, who already has everything. It's normal to want to give your best friends something because you love them, because you want them to know that you love them. It isn't a competition. Ainsley loves Ellen and Emmy and Sky equally, even if Emmy and Ainsley have been friends longest. Emmy's heart isn't as big as Ainsley's heart. Emmy loves Ainsley best. She also hates her best. She's had a lot of practice at both. They're in the sunroom. As if you could keep the sun in a room, Emmy thinks, well, if you could, Ainsley's mother probably would. But the sun has gone down, the world is night, and it belongs to all of them, even if it belongs to Ainsley most of all. Ainsley's brought out dozens of pillar candles, a small forest of mirrored candelabras, both of her boyfriends. They both wear little party hats because that's the thing about boyfriends, according to Ellen, who has a lot of opinions and isn't shy about sharing them. You can't take them too seriously. Of course, anyone can have an opinion. Emmy has plenty. In her opinion, in order not to take a boyfriend seriously, you have to have a boyfriend in the first place, and only Ainsley has 1, 2, 3. Creatures of the night in silly hats, vampire boyfriend Oliver and werewolf boyfriend Alan lounge on candy-striped settees and gaze with identical longing at their girlfriend Ainsley. Emmy decides against having a second piece of cake. 1 piece of cake really ought to be enough for anyone. And yet there on the tiled floor, right under the cake, plenty left, Emmy, why not have another piece really? And the candelabra is right there under everyone's noses. The new boyfriend has been waiting all this time. Emmy knew right away as soon as she came into the sunroom exactly which boyfriend it would be. It's dark inside the box, of course, night wrapped up in pink paper. Are his eyes open or closed? Can he hear them talking? Love will wake him. Love, oh love, terrible, wonderful love. Ainsley lifts the lid of the coffin, and white rose petals spill out all over the floor, and oh, Sky says, he's gorgeous. Real rose petals, real and crushed and bruised, probably not the best packing material, but oh, what a smell is filling the room. Not night after all. The boyfriend's eyes are closed, his arms are folded across his chest, but his palms are open and full of rose petals. His hair is dark, his face is very young, maybe a little surprised, his lips parted just a little, like he has just been kissed. Which one is he? Ellen says. The ghost one, Emmy says. Ainsley reaches out, touches the ghost boyfriend's face, brushes a piece of hair back from his eyes. So soft, she says, so weird, fake boyfriend, real hair. I thought they weren't selling those anymore, Ellen says. They're not, Emmy says. Her chest feels very tight, as if she's suddenly full of poison. You have to keep it all inside, like throwing yourself on a bomb to save everyone else, except you're the bomb. Why does Ainsley always get what she wants? Why does Ainsley always get what Emmy wants? She says, they don't, you can't get them now. Not unless you're Ainsley, right? Sky says without a trace of discernible malice. She scoops out handfuls of petals, throws them at Ainsley. They all throw rose petals. When Emmy reaches into the coffin, she tries very hard not to let her hand brush against Ainsley's ghost boyfriend. What are you going to call him? Ellen says. Don't know, Ainsley says. She's reading the instructions. So there are 2 modes, apparently, embodied or spectral. Embodied is just, the usual thing. She waves a hand in the direction of her vampire boyfriend Oliver. He waves back. In spectral mode, it's like a movie production and he floats around. You can hang out with him like that, but it's random or something, like he comes and goes. Sky says. So you can't see him all the time, but maybe he's watching you. What if you're getting dressed or on the toilet or something and all of a sudden he's there? Maybe that's why they did the recall, Ellen says. She's tearing a white petal into littler and littler pieces and smiling like that's her idea of fun. You can customize him, Ainsley says. If you have a thing that belonged to somebody who died, there's a compartment somewhere. Ew, inside his mouth. You put something in, I don't know, that part seems kind of dumb. Like you're really supposed to believe in ghosts or something. That's not supposed to be a good idea, Emmy says. That's the reason they did the recall. Remember, there were a lot of stories. People are so impressionable, Ainsley says. So turn them on already, Ellen says. No pun intended. What's the rush, Ainsley said. You have to come up with a name first. They debate names for the new boyfriend while Ainsley opens friend presents. They take more pictures, Ainsley holding the bottle of absinthe that Sky made from a recipe online. They throw rose petals at her, and so their rose petals caught in her hair. It's very pretty. Oliver and Alan in their hats, Ainsley sitting on Oliver's lap. They change out Alan's boy head for his wolf head. He can't talk with the wolf head on, but he's still very cute in his tuxedo, cuter than most real boys. More pictures, the new boyfriend in his box, Ainsley leaning over to kiss him. Ainsley wearing the red suede boots her grandmother sent, Ainsley holding up the tickets that Ellen got her to some show by some band they were both into. 2 tickets, one for Ainsley, the other for Ellen, of course. Emmy isn't really into music. Sky isn't really into music either. Music is Ellen and Ainsley's thing, whatever. Emmy's present for Ainsley is a beaded choker with an antique locket to sit right over the hollow of Ainsley's throat. The beads are cut glass and jet. There's a secret in the locket. The choker is in a little box in a pocket in Emmy's purse, and she doesn't take it out. She pretends to search for it, and then she says to Ainsley, "Uh-oh, I think I left her present at home, maybe?" Ainsley says, "Whatever, Emmy, give it to me at school on Monday." She passes around the homemade absinthe, and they all drink straight from the bottle. That way, Emmy figures, it's harder for everyone else to tell if you're only taking little sips or even only pretending. It's a little bit herbal and a little like toothpaste. You could call him Vincent, Sky says. She's looking at baby names on her phone, or Bran, Tor, Foster. Maybe not Foster, but it ought to be something old-fashioned. Ghost names ought to be old-fashioned. Because nowadays nobody ever dies, Ainsley says, and swigs from the absinthe bottle. Fake swigs, and bets Emmy. Let's all get fake drunk and have fake fun with Ainsley and her fake boyfriends. Because she's fairly sure that all of this is fake this whole night, the way she finds herself acting around Ainsley and Ellen and Sky tonight, maybe this whole year. And if it's not fake, if it's all real, this fun, these friends, this life, then that's even worse, isn't it? Emmy has no idea why she's in such a horrible mood, except wait, no, let's be honest, she knows. She's in a horrible mood because she's a horrible friend who wants everything that belongs to Ainsley, except maybe Ainsley's mother. Ainsley can keep her mother. Emmy has wanted a boyfriend ever since they first came out, even before Ainsley knew about them. Emmy was the one who told Ainsley about them. And then Ainsley had Oliver and Alan, and then you could buy the limited edition ghost boyfriend. And then there was the recall and you couldn't get a ghost boyfriend anymore, and so that was okay. Because then even if Emmy couldn't have a ghost boyfriend, Ainsley couldn't have one either, except now she does have one. Emmy wants a ghost boyfriend more than she's ever wanted anything. What about Quentin? That's a good name, Sky says. What about Justin? Ellen says. Then they are all looking at Emmy. She stares right back at Ellen, who says, oops, and shrugs and smiles. Ainsley can call Ainsley's ghost boyfriend whatever she wants, Emmy says. She knows what kind of friends she is with Ellen. Sometimes the friendship is more like a war. Ainsley can keep Ellen, too. Anyway, Emmy is the one who broke up with Justin, and Justin is the one who can't get over it in any way. Anyway, Ellen is the one who still has a thing for him. Emmy's been there, done that. Ainsley says, I'm going to call him Mint. They all laugh, and Ainsley says, no, really, his name is going to be Mint. He's my ghost boyfriend. I can call him whatever I want, and I'm going to call him Mint. Weird, Ellen says, but okay. Come on, Ainsley says. So they all go over and stand around the box, and then Ainsley leans down and sticks her fingers into the ghost boyfriend's hair, moving them around until evidently she's found the right place. His eyes open. He has really pretty eyes, long lashes. He looks at them each in turn. His lips part just a little like he's about to say something, but he doesn't. Emmy is blushing. She knows she's blushing. Hi, Ainsley says. I'm your girlfriend. Ainsley, you're Mint. You're my boyfriend. The new boyfriend's eyelids flutter shut. Eyelashes like black fans, skin just like skin. Even his fingernails are perfect and so real as anything Emmy has ever seen. When his eyes open again, he only looks at Ainsley. Okay, so we'll see you later, Ainsley says. She straightens up and says to Emmy and Ellen and Sky, you guys want to put on some music and dance or something? Wait, Ellen says. What about him? I mean, it. Are you just going to leave it in there? It takes them a while to wake up the first time, Sky says. Sky has a biblical handmaiden, Esther. Sky's parents were kind of religious for a while. Oh yeah, Ainsley says, there's one other thing. We have to choose a mode, embodied or spectral. What do you think? Embodied, Ellen says. Embodied, Sky says. Spectral, Emmy says. Okay, Ainsley says. Spectral might as well. She reaches back down, runs her fingers through her boyfriend's hair again. There. Now let's go out on the deck and dance in the moonlight. Come on, Oliver, Alan, you too. Ainsley and Ellen DJ. The moon is perfectly round and bright. This night is warm. Ainsley tells Oliver and Alan to dance with Emmy and Sky. Which is the kind of thing Ainsley does. She isn't ever selfish, but then you have to have things in order to be generous with them, right? Emmy and Oliver dance. She's in his arms, really, his hand on the small of her back. It's sort of a waltz that they're doing. which doesn't really suit whatever song this is, but Oliver can do either the waltz or the tango or a kind of sway standing there dance, and that gets old after a while. Sky bounces around with Alan, who still has his wolf head on. Alan is actually more fun to dance with than Oliver is, although the bouncing gets tiring after a while. Are you happy, darling? Oliver, the vampire boyfriend, says. So softly, Emmy has to tilt her head up and ask him to repeat himself. Not that this is, strictly speaking, really necessary. Oliver always asks the same questions. Sure, she says. Then, well, I don't know, not really. I could be happier. I'd like to be happier. Why not? If you can't be honest with your best friend's vampire boyfriend, who can you be honest with? Vampires are all about secrets and unhappiness, secret unhappinesses. You can see it in their black and fathomless eyes. I wish you were happy, my love, Oliver says. He presses her more firmly against his body, nuzzles her hair. How can I be happy if you were not? Ainsley's your love, not me, Emmy says. She really isn't in the mood. Besides, sometimes it's just really too weird playing pretend eternal love with a borrowed boyfriend when what you really want is your own boyfriend. It would be so much nicer to have your own. So I mean, don't be unhappy on my account. As you wish, Oliver says I shall be unhappy on my own account. How happy it makes me, oh delicious one, to be unhappy together with you. He clasps her even tighter in his arms until she has to ask him to ease up just a little. It's a fine line between being cuddled and being squeezed like a juice box, and vampire boyfriends sometimes cross right over that line, maybe without even noticing. There's also the endless hovering and the endless brooding, and all the endless talk about how delicious you are in eternity, and they like you to read poetry at them, the really old-fashioned rhyming kind even. It's supposed to be educational, okay? Like the way werewolf boyfriends go on and on about the environment and also are always trying to get you to go running with them. Emmy doesn't get music. She doesn't want to get it the way it wants to make you feel something. Just because it's a minor chord, you're supposed to feel sad. Just because it goes faster, your pulse is supposed to speed up. Why should you have to do what the music wants you to do? Why shouldn't it do what you want? She doesn't want a soundtrack for her life, and she doesn't want somebody's pretty lyrics getting in the way of what she's really thinking, whatever it is that she's thinking. Emmy doesn't want a vampire boyfriend or a werewolf boyfriend, not anymore. I want more absinthe, Ainsley says. Somebody go fetch the absinthe. I'll get it, darling, Oliver says. No, Emmy says, I'll go get it. If you send a boyfriend off for a bottle of homemade absinthe, likely as not, he'll come back with a bottle of conditioner or a table lamp. Thanks, Emmy, Ainsley says. No problem, Emmy says. But maybe you can't trust a friend either, because instead of going straight back with the absinthe, she finds herself lingering in the sunroom looking down at the new boyfriend. His eyes are closed again. She reaches down and touches his face. Just one finger. His skin is very soft. It isn't actually like skin, of course, but it's not like anything else either. His eyes don't open this time. He's still not all the way awake. She's read about this online. It will take a few hours, and anyway, Ainsley set him for spectral mode. His body will just lie here. His ghost will do whatever it is that ghosts do. He could already be here, she supposes. He could be watching her. She doesn't feel as if she's being watched. She feels all alone. So it's an impulse, maybe, that makes her reach inside her purse and take out Ainsley's present. She rips off the wrapping paper and the ribbon, not carefully. Inside the locket is a braided ring of human hair, Victorian according to the online seller, probably their own kid's hair, but never mind. 2 pieces of the braid are jet black, one is ash blonde. The ring doesn't fit over any of Emmy's fingers. Maybe she has fat fingers. She goes back to the coffin, crouches down beside it. Hey, she says softly, I'm Ainsley's friend, Emmy. She puts 2 fingers on his lips. She takes a breath and holds it like she's about to jump off a bridge into very deep water, while she is. Then she sticks her fingers inside Ainsley's ghost boyfriend's mouth. There are the teeth, and okay, here's the tongue. How weird is this? It's weird. Amy's not saying that this isn't weird, but she keeps on doing it anyway. Her fingers are where they really shouldn't be. It's not wet like a real mouth and a real tongue would be. The teeth feel pretty real. The tongue is weird. She keeps thinking how weird this is. She slides the finger under the not a real tongue, and there underneath is a place where when she presses down, a kind of lid thing opens up. She fumbles the hair ring into the compartment there and then presses the lid back down. Then she takes her fingers out of the ghost boyfriend's mouth, studies that face very carefully. Nothing about it seems different to her. When she stands up and turns around, Ellen is there in the doorway. Ellen says nothing, just waits. I thought I saw him move, Emmy says, but he didn't. Ellen gives her a long look. Emmy says, what? Nothing, Ellen says. She looks like she wants to say something else, and then she shrugs. Just come on. Oliver keeps on asking me to dance with him, and I don't want to. You know how I feel about Ainsley's boyfriends. What she is really saying is that she knows how Emmy feels about them. Emmy grabs the absinthe. Okay. Ellen says, Emmy, can I ask you something? Emmy waits. Ellen says, I don't get it, this boyfriend thing. They're creepy, they're fake, they're not real. I know how much you want one, and I know it sucks how Ainsley gets everything she wants. Emmy blurts out, Justin has no sense of humor, and he uses way too much body spray. He kisses like it's arm wrestling, except with lips, lip wrestling. Maybe he just needs more practice, Ellen says. I mean, Ainsley's boyfriends don't kiss at all. They're just really big dolls. They're not real. Maybe I don't want real, Emmy says. Whatever it is you want, I hope you get it, I guess. Ellen takes the absinthe bottle from Emmy, takes a long slug from the mouth, a real one. Apparently Ellen wants real, even if real isn't all that great. Emmy suddenly feels a wave of love for her. Ellen isn't always a good friend, but okay, she's a real friend, and Emmy appreciates that just as much as the way she really, really didn't appreciate it when Justin wanted to lip wrestle. They go back to the dance party, and the real friends and the fake boyfriends. They leave Ainsley's man all alone with the ring of hair in his mouth. Emmy doesn't feel guilty about that at all. It was a present for Ainsley, and Emmy is giving it to her, more or less. There's only a sludgy, oily residue left in the absinthe bottle by the time they go to bed. Oliver and Alan are back in their coffins in the closet downstairs in the rec room, and Ainsley has blown all the candles out in the sunroom. They've eaten the rest of the cake. Sky is already passed out on a couch in the living room. Is Mint around? Ainsley says he probably is. The ghost boyfriends are supposed to be kind of shy at first when you put them in spectral mode. They don't manifest much right at the beginning. You're just supposed to see them out of the corner of your eye once in a while when you aren't expecting them. Is that supposed to be fun? Ellen says, because it doesn't sound like fun. It's supposed to be real, Ainsley says, like a real ghost is falling in love with you. Like he could be here right now, watching us, watching me. There's something about the way she says this. Ainsley is so sure of being loved. Maybe Ainsley will get a surprise this time. Emmy hopes so. After all, what could be a better present for the girl who has everything? On that note, Ellen says, I'm going to go crash on your mom's bed. Your new boyfriend better stay the hell out of there. Ellen doesn't like to sleep in the same room as everyone else. She says it's because she snores. When is your mom getting back, Ainsley? Not until 2 or 3 tomorrow. I made her promise to call before she shows up. Ainsley is swaying her feet. She keeps putting her hand out to balance on things, the side table, the back of the settee, and the lid of the coffin. She stumbles and almost falls in, catches herself. Good night, Munt. God, you're cute, even cuter than Oliver, don't you think so? The question is for Emmy, I guess, she says, her heart burning for just one beat with that hatred, that poison again. She watches Ainsley lean over precariously and plant a kiss on Munt's forehead. I slept in Oliver's coffin once, Ainsley says to Ellen and Emmy. Emmy isn't sure what to say to that, and apparently Ellen doesn't know either. Emmy feels lit up and inside out, her hands and feet heavy and slow as lead, her skull and her ribcage all airy and hollow, all that poison dried up, powder. Or maybe this is just the way she thinks getting drunk on the absinthe should feel. She should probably go drink some water, take some Tylenol. Emmy always sleeps in Ainsley's bed when she stays over. She has her own toothbrush in Ainsley's bathroom, borrows Ainsley's t-shirts to wear to bed. Emmy even has a favorite pillow, and Ainsley always remembers which one it is. In the morning, she'll wear Ainsley's clothes home if she wants to. Ainsley never minds. They brush their teeth and they get dressed for bed, and they turn out the lights and get into bed, and all of that time, Emmy can hardly breathe. She doesn't even want to blink because maybe Mint is in the room with them. Maybe he is coming. Perhaps she will look up, and Mint will be there. He will be there, and then he'll be gone again. She knows Ainsley is thinking the same thing. Ainsley is watching for Mint, too. This has been a really, really good birthday, Ainsley says in the dark. It's everything I wanted it to be. I got everything I wanted. I'm glad, Emmy says. She meant it too. You deserve everything you're giving. Emmy doesn't think she'll be able to go to sleep. She doesn't want to sleep. She wants to stay awake. She could wait until Ainsley is asleep and go back to the sunroom. Maybe Mint will manifest there first. After all, his body is there. She tries to think of what she would say to him, what he might say to her, and soon enough, Ainsley's asleep. And then Emmy's asleep too. When she wakes up, she's in the middle of a nightmare, something about a garden. Someone is standing beside the bed, a boy, Mint. He's looking down at Ainsley, Ainsley asleep, Ainsley's mouth open, and Mint is touching Ainsley's mouth with his thumb. Emmy sits up in bed. Mint looks right through her, looks right at her. He looks at her and he smiles. He touches his fingers to his own mouth, then he disappears. Emmy doesn't see the ghost boyfriend again for 2 weeks. Ainsley says he's around. She thinks he's exploring the house. She says she sees him just for seconds at a time in different rooms, then he's gone. He shows up almost every time Ainsley watches TV, usually during the commercial breaks. He likes to watch commercials, Emmy says. So at the yogurt place, loading toppings on their plain frozen yogurt. I think he's being considerate, Ainsley says. He doesn't want to interrupt what I'm doing, so he waits for the commercial breaks. Like, I never see him in the bathroom or when I'm getting dressed for school, so I think it's the same thing with the TV. Over in the corner of the yogurt shop, a middle-aged woman sits and moves a stroller back and forth with one hand while she eats with the other. Emmy keeps looking over. She can't tell if it's a real baby asleep in the stroller or a baby. So he's there for a few seconds and he does what exactly, she says. He watches TV with me, the commercials. He seems to like the commercials where a man and a woman are driving somewhere in a car, you know, the one where there's a road going alongside the ocean or a hill. He looks at the commercials on TV and he looks at me, Ainsley says. He just looks at me like nobody's ever looked at me before, and then he goes away. There's something about the way Ainsley says this, about her face, and so Emmy does what the ghost boyfriend does. She looks at Ainsley as carefully and as closely as she can. Ainsley looks like she's had a very bad night's sleep. Her lips are chapped and there's a lot of concealer poorly applied under her eyes, as if she's keeping secrets there under the skin. Do you ever see him at night in your bedroom? Ainsley blinks. No, she says, no, I don't think so. Good, Emmy says, because that would be creepy if he was in there looking at you while you were asleep. Ainsley's face crumbles just a little. Yeah, that would be creepy. School is school. Why can't it ever be anything else? Emmy can't believe she has 2 more years of this, 2 more years of equations and sad books where bad things happen to boring people, and Justin giving her wounded looks. Okay, so maybe he'll get over it faster than that if she ignores him. 2 more years of unflattering gym shorts and Spanish that she's never going to use, and having to be the person that she's always been because that's the person everyone thinks she is, that everyone assumes she's always going to be. Everyone thinks this is the real Emmy. And what if the Emmy they see is the real Emmy, and the one on the inside is just hormones and chemicals and too many little secrets and weird jumbled thoughts that don't really mean anything after all? Maybe she should shave her head. Maybe she should take her classes more seriously. Maybe she should give Justin another chance. Maybe not. She has a dream that night about driving a fast car along a curving road. The ocean is far below. The ghost boyfriend sits in the passenger seat. They don't say anything to each other. The moon is high overhead. She texts Ainsley in the morning, I dreamed about your boyfriend. Weird, right? Ainsley doesn't text back. That afternoon, Emmy and Sky go over to Ainsley's house to study for a Spanish quiz. Alan takes AP Latin because Alan. They mostly don't study, though. They ransack the cupboards for the Reese's peanut butter cups and Little Debbie Spinwheels and bags of Oreos that Ainsley's mother hides away in soup trains and behind boxes of rice and cereal. Once they found a little baggie with weed in it and they flushed it down the toilet. Ainsley says they're doing her mother a favor eating the Oreos and the Reese's. They're teenagers. They have higher metabolisms. Sky says, "Donde estamos?" Ainsley says he's downstairs in the rec room with Oliver and Alan. She's decapitating a Reese's peanut butter cup. Ainsley only ever eats the insides, like a spider. Spiders only eat the insides. I turned him off, actually. Did what? Emmy says, I turned him off. Ainsley said, he was kind of freaking my mom out. I can see why they did the recall. It's not romantic having a boyfriend pop in and out of existence all the time. And it's not like you could sit and have a conversation with him. Or like Matt never said anything romantic. He just stared. And, you know, after a week it felt like maybe he was somewhere nearby staring at you all the time. Like if I was looking in one direction, maybe he was right there behind me. I kept turning around and he wouldn't be there. But that didn't mean that he wasn't there. He might have been there. Every time I turned around and didn't see him, I was positive he was still there in the room with me, somewhere just out of sight. My neck got sore because I kept jerking my head back to look at the ceiling. Because once I looked up and he was there. And once I found him under the kitchen table, so I kept having to look under things too. It's like a real ghost in a movie, Sky says. Sky loves scary movies. No one will go see them with her. What about Embodied? Did you try him out in Embodied mode? Emmy says. Yeah, Ainsley says, and that was also no fun. He said all the right stuff, the stuff Oliver and Alan say, but you know what? I didn't buy it. Like, not that it was fake, like he was lying, like he was making fun of me. I don't know, maybe we're getting too old for boyfriends. Let's go turn him on, Sky says. I want to see him floating on the ceiling. No, Ainsley says. Ainsley never says no. They both stare at her. She says, here, you want the chocolate? And I'm gonna stop there. Things get worse.
happy to take some questions if you guys have
We
them.
have them. Yeah.
I have one for Gavin.
Yeah.
How do you combine folklore with futuristic Scotland? Like, how do you see the two working together?
Well, I figure that folklore is one of those living things that lives to be, it only lives if it's used, right? So a selkie, a mythic creature that comes out of the water, drops its skin, is a seal, drops its skin, become a woman. That's one story, but how does that story, you know, can you still use that story in 50, 60, 100 years' time? You know, apply some, yes, why not? You know, does that cover it? I think basically my answer would be try it. It's very messy. I think folklore should be used and abused, but I think most fiction modes should be used and abused, and are most fun when inverted and are complicated. Use folklore a lot. You can answer that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun to take something, and if you if you just sort of retell it the way that it's always been told, unless you sort of have a very unique kind of voice or a style that is adding something, it feels static. It doesn't feel necessarily relevant. It can, but there's already a lot of work like that. And so, as Gavin was saying, there's folklore it should be sort of the opposite of static. There should be some kind of connection still to contemporary culture, or else the story doesn't have relevance anymore. So you figure out what the things are that are currently going on, or the current kinds of stories that people are interested in, and you sort of reuse it.
I think folklore is this kind of wave that you're living in that you cannot see. You don't really know the stories that will survive over your time. You know, like fairies and goblins and brownies and things like that have survived a little bit. Will they survive further on? Who knows? But trying to kind of lift those up and throw them into the future is not a lot of fun. Any other questions?
Yeah.
How much of the new boyfriend story was reaction to this like rise of paranormal romance? And if it was a reaction to that, how often both of you find yourself writing in response to trends as opposed to just ignoring them entirely?
I think that I'm a big consumer of stories and sort of young adult material. Really, really like young adult novels. I often work with other writers. Two of the people that I spend most time working with are a writer named Holly Black and a writer named Cassandra Clare, who are almost always writing about, they're writing fantasies. And Holly was working on a book about dolls, and Cassie was working on a book that had a lot of romance and a lot of different kinds of boyfriends. And I was watching Vampire Diaries, and I really wanted to write a vampire story, which I'd never done before. And I ended up writing two, and it's one of two stories. They're both they're actually more ghost stories, but it was fun to sort of think about current, contemporary vampire narratives, because everybody sort of has a particular one that they like. I don't know if that answered the question or not.
Yeah, I think the important thing there was the Vampire Diaries. When she said was watching, which meant is watching, and it was re-watching.
And also following a lot of communities of people online who really love it and interact with it in very passionate ways. Really, really spend a lot of time analyzing it. And I got very interested in fandom communities and people who take something and attach to it personally. I was a kid who, the things that I liked, I loved a lot. So, in some ways it's based on personal, the kind of kid that I was, who wanted things really, really badly. That's always a great starting place for a story.
yourself like a psychological risk?
I would say yes, I do. That I really, really like fantasy, but my father is a psychologist. You know, we were his test subjects when he was getting his degree. He gave us all the tests that he was learning how to give. And in fact, when we go visit him on his farm, he still will take us aside and, you know, give us the Minnesota multiphasic or whatever test.
If we're lucky.
And then sort of report back to us, which he didn't do when we were kids. But he spent a lot of time, you know, we spent a lot of, that was sort of the quality family time, was talking about some of the work that he was doing and the research that he was doing. That's always, you know, what we did with my dad. So, yeah, I hope that when I write, you know, that I'm getting at something that, you know, that I would say when my dad reads the stories, he's never said to me, the stories themselves are, hasn't really talked about the psychological realism, and what he does is he likes to use this analytical tool. So he will report back to me about my own, you know, yeah, you know, it's really interesting that you wrote about that. I'll say thank you. Let's not talk about it. Yeah.
All right, so the granny's kind of like this innocuous type, right? But your granny is, she's a mother killer and an international player, right? Who's rescuing various war criminals from the worst justice that could be meted out to them. But her kind of her affect around those things is pretty casual. She's not racked with guilt. So my question about the
She's very pragmatic.
so my question about the granny is the kind of contrast between the harmless and the kind of the powerful. How did you marry those in a single figure?
I think that Western culture is very odd that it has this image of the granny as this powerless person, you know, the wee old lady with the stick walking down the street. Where in many cultures, including Western culture, the grannies are immensely important. You know, many families would fall apart without the help of a granny. My parents both worked, had 6 kids, and we would stop off our 2 wee grannies. And I say we, I'm not sure if they were that big. The wee grannies would look after many of us kids. They would somehow, you know, I have 1 child and I can't look after 1 child. How did wee grannies look after 6? I do not know. But these you know, if you think of the fighting grannies from social justice movements, we live in Northampton in Massachusetts, and there's a woman, Frances Crowe, I think her name is, who is like 93 years old, and she is the one who, for X number of years, has been leading the fight against the nuclear reactor in Vermont. Vermont, you know, the Socialist Republic of Vermont has a nuclear reactor, which is this you know, dreadful thing that will cost billions of dollars for you know, to be radioactive for years and years, and everybody's like, that's a big idea. And there's one little old lady who's like, close that thing down, and she's the one who eventually people are listening to and following. And I think that being from a country of 5 million people that sits on top of a country of 55 or 60 million people who basically ignores it. You know, when I was a teenager, it was kind of like when George Bush was your president, and I did not like George Bush, and I did not like Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. She wasn't voted in Scotland. She, you know, if Scotland was a separate country, she would never have been anywhere near any kind of leadership position, which is one of the reasons for the long, slow devolution of Scotland. So coming from this little country, where, you know, sometimes we all just feel like fighting grannies with our walking sticks. Listen to us! We know, oh, you're just not listening. And in England, no, they're just not listening. I think there are many things coming into that character who kind of goes her own way.
Anything to say on Scotland's voting to become separate nation? I was the last one.
I do think it's fascinating. You know, I don't like the balkanization of countries. But if I like federated groups like the EEC, you know, it's an economic kind of disaster zone, and yet it's better that the EEC exists than it doesn't. The United States of America is probably better off as 50 disunited states than, you know, the incredibly wealthy California Republic, you know, the very far right Texas, well, maybe not but Texas, you know, the dying middle of the country, the eastern states. How would that country, would those 4 or 5 different countries do well? I'm not sure. Would Scotland do well by itself? I don't know. Whiskey, tourism, oil, it's not bad, but would the English give up the oil money? They'd have to be stupid, right? So it's an ugly fight. At the moment, it's an incredibly ugly fight, where people are being asked, big companies have been put on the spot. They're like, so, huge Scottish bank, what do you think?
Well,
And their investors are like, ah!
The Scottish banks are saying to their, the banks that are not Scottish are saying to their employers, if Scotland votes for independence, we may leave, and then you won't have a job, so we think you should vote you should not vote for independence. And so there's a lot of big players. Yeah, curious to see.
I was wondering how much help when you interact with young leaders, what kinds of reactions you get, and how that maybe affects the way you know.
You know, I've had one collection published, a young adult collection, I get some feedback, but not tons. You know, it's mostly people make things and send them, which is really awesome. But I have friends who get a lot of responses on Tumblr or on Twitter or emails, and you know, I think it's both very rewarding. It's also a lot of work. There are a lot of people who have had a very strong emotional response and who are at a point in their life where stories matter a lot, and that can be really tricky to navigate. You know. And I do remember, and this is still true, that you read something that has a lot of power, you know, your response to it is pretty powerful. And then you have a chance to meet an author, and it's really strange because you know a lot about work, you have a lot of feelings about that work. Based on that work, maybe you have a lot of feelings about the author, but at the same time you know that they know nothing about you. And it's a really weird, imbalanced relationship. And there's something about the communities on Tumblr and on Twitter where I think that imbalance creates real feelings of anxiety on both sides. But you know, the other thing about young adult readerships is they read really carefully. They are enormously enthusiastic. The work does matter a lot to them. They're really, really smart readers. And so, you know, that's why people that write for young adults write for them, because it's exactly the kind of audience that you want to have. Much more fun sometimes than writing for adults. You know, much more rewarding.
Kelly, I noticed that your character had, or your sentences were matching the way your character thought in a short sentence or kind of plain spoken way. And I'm wondering, how do you decide the kinds of sentences your characters will think in?
You know, there are stories that I don't like to read because I don't like to read out loud that I've written because I don't want people who are listening to the story to hear them in my voice. there are a bunch of stories like that. And then there are stories like The New Boyfriend where it's close enough to my natural speaking voice that I feel like I could pull it off. I'm okay if you hear my voice, you know, if you hear me and then read the story. And that is a very easy voice for me to write in. That sort of, that rhythm is pretty close to the way that I would naturally write, whereas some of the other sentence patterns or sort of even paragraphs, silent paragraphing is a little harder to find my way into. But that story was a lot of fun to write. Very fast. Fast is always fun.
I just kind of wanted to read you her stories.
Yeah, there's this, the last story in the book is called Mothers Lock Up Your Daughters because they're completely terrifying. And I think it's the best thing that we've ever published. It's really scary. We asked a bunch of writers to turn in stories about monsters. We're like, write stories about monsters and family or monsters and, you know, relationships. This would be great because all the people said yes. And then the stories started coming like, these are all really scary, awful stories. And then we sort of thought, oh, okay, well, I guess kind of asking for it, you know, it's not like we ask for cheerful stories about monsters. But they're all really, really fantastic. All right.
That's out already?
No, this comes out probably in September, end of September.
And even though they're awful and scary, it's for young adults.
Really entertaining. Yes, yes. We did wonder if the editor, I can't know what I was going to say, get one or two that are a little bit less scary. And they were like, this is great, it's fantastic.
One of the stories that just, it's horrifying, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of gross. No, we can't send this in, and they didn't blink.
No,
Just
it's like great, awesome. See that you have demonic sacrifice and people dying, and here, this is great. So I'm really curious about what the reviews of the book are like.
Because the last one we did, people were, it was all over the place. They weren't just like 15 Victorian stories, it was all over the place. People liked that. This is
It's more uniformly
going to
horrible.
be like monster, 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 monster.
This is like going to a film festival of really scary movies, which I would do, but he would frankly not do. This is actually not a project that Gavin would naturally decide to do on his own.
Well, thanks.
Thank you very much.